Now's the time to go to CBSSports.com to fill out your March Madness bracket. And here's a look at Avery Johnson's. By the way, that fit is fantastic from our coach. And to go with it, a bracket that has 3 1 seeds make it to Arizona. And there'll be a tease on who gets to Glendale and comes away with a national championship. That's just a bit of a teaser. We got to walk it through with our coach, Avery Johnson, who spent some time, of course, at Alabama, got to that tournament there in the 2017/18 season. All right, Coach, let's get through your bracket. We're going to go region by region, and we're going to start in the East region, which has top seed UConn and 16 seed Stetson. It also has Florida Atlantic and Northwestern. Interestingly enough, in this bracket, 3 out of the 4 teams that got to the Final Four in Houston last year are here. So if we focus on the top half of the bracket, some people thought that Florida Atlantic surprisingly was an 8 seed. So you have UConn moving through, and who moves through between Florida Atlantic and Northwestern?
Oh, I got Florida Atlantic. This team obviously went to the Final Four last year, basically brought back the entire team, a very well-coached team. So I got Florida Atlantic. I just think they're too deep for Northwestern. Northwestern's obviously had some big wins this year, one specifically over Purdue, but I got Florida Atlantic advancing the matchup against and play UConn.
Bottom half of the top half of that bracket, San Diego State and UAB, Auburn and Yale. Some people surprised at Auburn, a 4 seed. You have the Aztecs moving on, and you also have the Tigers moving on.
Yeah, I love San Diego State, and I got them moving on. Auburn is a tough team, obviously winning the SEC tournament championship. They're a very deep team, but San Diego State has the looks of a Final Four team. I covered them 3 times this year. Jaden Ledee, player of the year in that conference, the Mountain West Conference. I love their depth. Coach Brian Dutch has done an amazing job with that team again.
If we continue with the East bracket there, BYU finding new life in the Big 12. They get through past Duquesne in that 6-11 matchup. Then 3-14 sees the Illini getting through. So we go a little bit chalk here on that part of the bracket. As we continue on here in the East region, Drake a 10-7 winner over Wazoo, and then Iowa State. And then the Jackrabbits of South Dakota State, they do not get past the Cyclones, so it'll be a 10-2 matchup there. And so we expand a little bit further as we get now to this part of the bracket. UConn, Florida Atlantic, San Diego State, and Auburn. You have the Huskies and Aztecs advancing, Coach.
Yeah, and I love San Diego State here. I think their size and athleticism, being able to switch pick and rolls. Auburn, you know, they're a team, they're a deep team, but sometimes they have a lot of uncharacteristic turnovers. I think San Diego State makes them pay. They don't have an answer for Jaden Ledee. They get hot from the 3-point line. Jay Powell is doing a nice job in the lineup there for San Diego State. Again, Brian Dutcher here advances with the San Diego State Aztecs.
The Aztecs leading the way of a 6-bid Mountain West Conference. And again, we'll tackle some of the other teams in this bracket. But if we continue in the East, BYU and Illinois, it's the Illini to get through and the Cyclones that get through.
Yeah, and I love Iowa State here. Taymon Lindsey, Curtis Jones, those guys, a team that can be very explosive at times. They were so dominant in that Big 12 game against Houston, that championship game. And they really created that separation. Another really outstanding defensive team.
And as we get to the Elite 8 in the East region, Coach, we have UConn and San Diego State, Illinois and Iowa State. Who gets to the final to be the Huskies in this situation, and then the Cyclones in this situation?
Yeah, and I was tempted to take San Diego State here because I'm independent of how they performed in the conference. This team is built for another Final Four run, but UConn, Donovan Cleanan, too much size, depth, experience. They win that game. They beat San Diego State again. And then right here with this UConn-Iowa State game, I just got UConn going back to the Final Four.
Okay, so you've got UConn advancing out of the Elite 8 there. Now our focus turns out to the West region. North Carolina grabbing that 4th 1 seed. There were some conversations that Iowa State potentially could have grabbed it. Iowa State actually ended up being the last 2 seed in the field of 68. Michigan State continues its run with Tom Izzo to the NCAA men's tournament, and we focus there first and foremost. You do have North Carolina going chalk through. Then, Coach, Michigan State or Mississippi State, what interests you most about this game with Sparty moving through?
Yeah, I watched Mississippi State in the SEC tournament. I think they have too many scoring droughts, and I think Michigan State's going to capitalize on those scoring droughts. I don't think Mississippi State has enough three-point shooting to win this game against Michigan State.
So it's going to be North Carolina and Michigan State moving on. We have St. Mary's and Grand Canyon. You know, Coach, just personally for me, I hate seeing some of these small schools versus small schools. I know we're going to get it with Gonzaga and New State later, but we've got the Gales getting through, and then Alabama, your old program, against Charleston. And so we go chalk here, 4-5. So we see Alabama and St. Mary's getting through. Moving on to Clemson and New Mexico. The Lobos, who had a nice run of the Mountain West tournament, getting through. And then Baylor and Colgate. The Bears get through there in the 3-11 matchup. So the Lobos get through past the Tigers in that situation. And then the bottom half of the West bracket has Dayton, Nevada in a 10-7 matchup. And Arizona and Long Beach State, the Flyers are going through for Coach, and the Wildcats are getting through for Coach in that part of the bracket. So as we take a look now at those teams that get through the West, getting back to the top there, North Carolina, Michigan State, St. Mary's, and Alabama. You have the Tar Heels moving through, Coach, and then the Gales getting past your old program.
Yeah, and this is a tough one because you're talking about two teams that can score the basketball. Alabama really struggled, towards the end of the season, but they struggled against a team like Florida. That's a tough team to play. Alabama, obviously, outstanding offensive team, but you got to be a little bit more balanced. So we'll take St. Mary's here to advance against Alabama.
Randy Bennett and his Gales getting to the Sweet 16, according to our coach. And then, speaking of teams that move on to this part of the round, you are going to have Baylor and Arizona getting through.
Yeah, and this Baylor-New Mexico game could go either way. I've had New Mexico a couple of times this year. Masburn, House, those three guards are tough. Richard Pitino has them playing at a high level, but I got Baylor advancing and then playing against an outstanding Arizona team. Caleb Love, man, I know he's just itching to have an opportunity to play against North Carolina as we move on in this bracket.
So it's interesting you brought up Caleb Love because there's a potential path for the Caleb Love game if North Carolina and Arizona end up meeting, and that's exactly how you have it going in this bracket.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And we go in chalk here, but, man, this is going to be one of the most outstanding games in the tournament. North Carolina playing against their old teammate, Caleb Love Davis, or R.J. Davis playing against his old backcourt mate. And remember, Caleb Love tried to get in to and enroll at Michigan, but it didn't work out, and he transferred to Arizona, and now he's going to be playing against Arizona. But in this game, I got UNC, North Carolina, advancing and beating Caleb Love in the Arizona Wildcats.
In the Caleb Love Bowl, you're going with his old program in North Carolina there, advancing to Glendale, Arizona. All right, let's move over to the South region where we do have Houston as a 1 seed. Speaking of teams like BYU that moved to the Big 12, Houston, which had found some success in the American Athletic Conference, coming over to the Big 12, and Kelvin Sampson and company just having a fantastic year. Also, games to note there, the Boise State-Colorado play-in game will face Florida, the bottom half of the bracket, with Marquette being the 2 seed. That game with Western Kentucky happening in Indianapolis there Friday afternoon. All right, let's go back to the top half and talk about Go Cougs. You do have Houston moving through Longwood there. Then again, in that 8-9 coin flip type game, Coach, you're going with Texas A&M here.
Yeah, I like Texas A&M. Buzz Williams done a nice job with that team. They played well in the SEC tournament. I believe they're going to get one or two more stops at the end of the game. This is going to be a tight game. And remember, I coached against Buzz Williams back in 2018 when I was coaching for Alabama. They were the 8th seed. We were the 9th seed. So, and we upset them in that first round. So I got Coach Buzz Williams and Texas A&M advancing, beating Nebraska in that tight game.
Let's continue on that half of the bracket there. Again, both games on CBS Friday evening. You do go a little bit chalk here. The Badgers getting past James Madison, and John Shire's Duke Blue Devils getting past the Catamounts of Vermont, with both of those games happening in Brooklyn, New York. We know Duke certainly loves the New York and Brooklyn area. Moving on here, NC State gets the best of Texas Tech, and then Kentucky bets Oakland out in Pittsburgh to set up an 11-3 matchup. Let's continue the conversation. I was bringing up Boise State and Colorado. We were talking about the Mountain West and the strength of getting 6 teams. However, there are 2 teams in the Mountain West having to play in the play-in round. You have Florida moving on. But here's where things get spicy, Coach, with Marquette and Western Kentucky. You see 15-2.
Yeah, I just called the Conference USA Tournament Finals with Western Kentucky beating UTEP. And, man, this is an explosive team. They led Conference USA with 80.5 points a game. You're talking about a deep team. Their best player, Howard, basically comes off the bench. He was the 6th man of the year in the conference. But they can play inside, out. The outstanding 3-point shooting team. So I got Western Kentucky upsetting Marquette and basically trying to do the same thing Florida Atlantic did last year when they were in Conference USA, surviving and advancing.
I hope Coach Shaka Smart not catching this here right now on CBS Sports HQ. But, hey, we got to tell it like it is. All right, getting back to that South region top half bracket there with Houston, Texas A&M, Wisconsin, and Duke. You're going to go Houston and Wisconsin. So the Badgers getting the best of the Dukies there, Coach. If we continue the conversation, again, I got to get back to Western Kentucky, because then I have to ask you whether they get through to face Kentucky.
What do you think?
I think you're bullish on them the way you're talking about them.
You know what? I love this team. Again, you talking about experience, quality, depth. I had a front row seat to watch these guys put on the show. They're going to be rested and ready. And they upset Florida. Remember, Florida lost their starting center, unfortunately. He just had surgery on yesterday. So that's where I'm going with the big upset with Western Kentucky.
So then it's interesting here, because you've gone with the big upset, but Houston still advances, gets past Wisconsin. Now, does the Cinderella run here for Western Kentucky and for the Hilltoppers, or does Kentucky give them a little bit of pushback here? Which team, which Kentucky, Coach, gets through?
Yeah, Western Kentucky, now they'll get a chance to fly back to Bowling Green, because Kentucky is going to advance in this situation. Coach Calipari obviously has a young team. This team is very explosive offensively. We've seen them hang up, 117 points on Alabama this year. So we know what they're capable of. They just got to get a little bit more focus on the defensive end, but I got Kentucky advancing.
So the Cinderella run ends for the Hilltoppers there. And just to give you a little bit of feedback, too, in terms of his selection with Kentucky and Houston, we're going with Houston in the Final Four. All right, now let's get to the final bracket before we get to the big dog games at the end here in the Midwest region. We've got Purdue trying to avoid last year's situation with FDU. They're going to play the winner of Montana State and Grambling State in that first round in Indianapolis Friday evening. You got Utah State, regular season champs in the Mountain West, again outside of San Diego State, the highest seed out of the Mountain West Conference, and Jamie Dixon's TCU team. So you're going to go Purdue and TCU here. If we continue on, I mentioned that small school matchup that we see with Gonzaga and McNeese. It's going to be Mark Few and Will Wade. You're going to go Mark Few in this situation. And Kansas, despite all the injuries and depth issues, Rock Chalk Jayhawk does get through Salt Lake City, Utah in that first game to face the Zags. South Carolina and Oregon's an interesting one, Coach, because you like the Ducks in this 11-6 matchup.
Yeah, I like the Ducks in this situation. They played extremely well Pac-12 tournament. When you look at, this is a very well-coached team. I had a chance to coach against Oregon 2 times when I was in college, coaching in college. So I got the Ducks advancing here, upsetting South Carolina. And also, when you go back to that Kansas game, you mentioned Kansas. They're getting their two of their best players back. So that's why I got them advancing. But I think this is an opportunity for the Oregon Ducks to really continue the momentum that they started in the Pac-12 tournament.
Okay, so you have Oregon facing Creighton. Big East only getting 3 teams into the tournament, but the quality is there with Creighton being a 3 seed. Bottom half of this bracket has Rodney Terry's Texas Longhorns facing the winner of Virginia, Colorado State. Doesn't matter who wins that one. You have the Longhorns moving on to face Rick Barnes, the old mentor-mentee there with Tennessee and Texas going on there. So taking a look at the Midwest region as it stands now. Back up to the top half. You do have Purdue getting through TCU and Jamie Dixon's team there. And you mentioned Kansas because that was the theme for Bill Self. Rest your guys in the conference tournament and save them for this situation, which you have them getting past the Zags to face the Boilermakers.
Yeah, they're going to get past the Zags to play the Boilermakers. And then when they get past the Zags to play the Boilermakers, man, you talking about 2 high-powered teams. But Zach Edey, the player of the year in my mind, is just too much. Even though they lost that game in the Big Ten semifinals, they're going to be ready to go. Unfortunately, I don't know why they had Zach Edey guarding the inbound man and not protecting the basket, but that's another story. They'll make that adjustment. They'll get the balance scoring, the 3-point shooting from the role players. Zach Edey is just impossible to guard, and I think he puts pressure on Kansas and their big guy. That pick and pop from Kansas is going to be something that Purdue's going to have to adjust to.
Bottom half of the Midwest bracket, so you do have Rick Barnes getting the best of Rodney Terry, but then again, it's Oregon over Creighton in this situation. The Ducks moving on a couple rounds here, Coach, for you.
Yeah, and Nafali Dante, who had 25 points in that Pac-12 championship game. He's playing at a high level. These 2 teams, 2 well-coached teams. Rick Barnes had a chance to coach against him for 4 years. He's going to be ready. You're talking about a team that really went through the gauntlet of that SEC. That got, 8 teams in the NCAA tournament. Very impressive.
Purdue gets past Kansas, so Matt Painter gets the best of Bill Self, and then Rick Barnes gets there to a 1-2 matchup, and you do like Tennessee to move on to the Elite 8. And as we get to the Final Four, you talked about the teams you like, UConn, North Carolina, Houston. Tell us why Tennessee over Purdue quickly here, Coach.
Yeah, I just think, for Tennessee offensively, they're going to put Zach Edey in the bind. They can go big, they can go small, but the defense of Tennessee wins this game in a close one.
Lastly, Final Four. Who do you like to get to the final? Who do you like in the final?
Yeah, again, you're talking about UConn, North Carolina, Houston, and then I got Tennessee. And then the winner of that Houston-Tennessee game, I have Tennessee winning that game and advancing, then North Carolina playing Tennessee in the national championship game. And then Hubert Davis, remember 2 years ago in New Orleans. Now they get a chance. They didn't go to the NCAA tournament last year, struggled, but now they're going to turn their pain into a game, and they're going to win the national championship and bring it back to Chapel Hill. I think they're one of the deepest teams, and when you look at this UNC team, they're very, very explosive on both ends of the floor. Davis is a maestro at handling this basketball. I'm very impressed with what I've seen. Sure, they lost to North Carolina State. North Carolina State was a very desperate team, but UNC puts it all together, and they cut down the nets in Phoenix.
All right, and with that, it would be a 7th national championship for North Carolina in men's college basketball. Avery Johnson joining us here on HQ. Coach, certainly appreciate it. The Eye on College Basketball podcast will have you covered naturally from now until the national championship with co-host Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander.